Good evening. Welcome to Town Administrator's Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Maio. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
We're on the downhill slide toward Thanksgiving.
Towards first town meeting, then Thanksgiving. Perfect.
Yep. We're taping this only a few days before regular town meeting on the 18th at 8 a.m.
8
at the Galvin.
at the Galvin, the Veterans Memorial Auditorium at the Galvin.
Yep.
Meeting starts at 8, but I think people should come a little bit early and partake of a muffin and a coffee and some fellowship with your citizens. And it's great to have. It's the Greenwood PTO.
Thanks to the Greenwood PTO, who are using it as a fundraiser for the Boys and Girls Club.
Fabulous.
So
Fabulous.
Everybody wins on this
Yeah,
one.
absolutely.
This month, we're going to be talking about something that I'm not sure a lot of people in town have heard about. In some ways, it's, the basic idea has merit, but I'm not sure it fits for Wakefield. And this is the state mandated Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, MBTA Community Multifamily Zoning Requirements. Let's talk about first how this came about.
So the state of Massachusetts, and you've heard this from a number of, the governor's office and the housing bureau has stated that Massachusetts is 200,000 units short for housing, market rate housing. They're talking market rate housing.
Okay.
And they say it is a disadvantage for businesses coming here. People can't find, or when they find employees that want to move here, they can't move here because there's no housing. Rents are high because of the old law of supply and demand, and particularly around the commuter rail that, goes in and out of Boston to different communities. So it's been an issue that has, I guess, been kicked around at the state for a while about how can housing, what can the state do to create more housing? Okay. So they came up with this Mass General Law 40A, Section 3A, kind of changed the Mass General Law, and it was tacked on to the 2021 budget. So it's kind of like an amendment as all the budget was being done with very little debate about it, in my opinion. Although it was, this legislation was reached out to the Mass Municipal Association, which I'm a member of, and active on committees there. When we were asked to give some, commentary on it, as we are normally,
Right.
It didn't seem like any of that made it into the mix, because this wasn't on its own. It didn't stand on its own as part of an overall housing policy and discussion. There's going to be hearings tacked onto the budget. So maybe even our legislators who voted on it, they wanted to get the budget through, and we're more concerned about that. So this gets passed. It gets passed, and there are no regulations attached to it. How does this even work? But basically what it says in its initial form was around the train station in your community or around bus stops in your community, depending what community you are, you need to create a zoning, within a half a mile radius of those, you need to create a zoning bylaw or the ability for a certain amount of housing to be built as a matter of right. And what a matter of right means is that you go to the building inspector's office and you say, I want to build like a single family residence, a single family zone resident. I want to build this house. Here's my plan. It meets all the setbacks. It meets, it meets the height restriction. It meets all that. Looks good. You get your permit. You don't have to go through an adjudicatory hearing with the Board of Appeals, which is a special permit. So the thought process that the state had was that there needed to be this zoned area around the commuter rail that allowed for multifamily housing, okay, as a matter of right. And the state considers multifamily housing 4 units or more. So in that area, you have to have zoning that allows for 4 units or more as a matter of right.
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, then all of the apartment developments and condo developments in Wakefield over the last 8 to 10 years doesn't count at all.
Don't count because, don't count under this particular bylaw, this particular state law, because I can't think of one that wasn't built via a special permit. Meaning that you had to go to the zoning board of appeals and or the planning board, usually the zoning appeals, and go through hearings and get testimony and change your project to what we think would comport better to the neighborhood. So whether you as an abutter agree or don't agree, it needed to go through that adjudicatory process, and it doesn't count for the creation or the potential to create housing in that area. The other item that is also kind of bothersome to me is that, there is also not, in its initial stage, that's changed a little bit now, there was not an affordability component in here at all. So you might add a bunch of new units,
Right.
and we in Wakefield have been trying to make sure that 10% of our housing units are affordable,
Right.
in the eyes of the state. And if we're adding, 1,600 units, which this law requires us to add, and we'll talk about what adding means in a little while, I'm sure, and none of them are affordable, what does that mean for us? That means that we keep pushing that number down the road of subsidized housing units we need to create in town.
So, in short, the apartment complex over Tano's,
Yes,
the
perfect example.
floors added to Harvard Mills,
Yes,
the mini apartment building next to Dunkin' Donuts,
great, yep,
the building where the Boyd home used to stand,
yep,
and the new development at the head of the lake, as well as all the apartment buildings on
Yep.
North Avenue,
Yep.
don't count.
Foundry Street. They don't count for purposes of this, no.
Even though, from a distance point of view, they all fit the profile.
Correct. They do not count under this law. Now, that doesn't mean we can't look at their land and include that land in a zoning area and say, okay, if you put 4 units on all these properties by matter of right, the capacity or the potential to meet this bylaw is there.
Okay.
So we could include those lots for that.
Okay.
But we're not going to get credit for the, 200 units at the head of the lake, and my numbers I know are off, and all those other things. So it is you're correct. They don't count for this, okay? And it really,
Which doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever.
it is certainly, it is poorly drafted in my opinion. And it is certainly counter to communities like, and I'll take Wakefield and Reading, that although we created different zoning areas around our train stations, we kind of embraced this same mixed use policy with an affordability component. Now Wakefield, the unit above Tono's, I think 16% of those are affordable. The Foundry Street, the old Harvard Mills, I think 18% of those are affordable. Put us ahead of that 10% that the state required. So the state did kind of redraft the regulations for this bill and did say that, well, 10% should be affordable. Okay, but in a 4-family, there isn't going to be any affordable. It's going to have a 10-family, a 10-unit building.
Right.
All right, and one needs to be affordable. So you're just treading water and holding it there.
Okay,
So-
but then the other aspect is the point of this rule is to make it easier for people to take advantage of buses, trains, and where applicable,
Correct.
subway.
Exactly.
Except there is no guarantee that the people who take those units are
Correct.
going to use buses, trains,
Right.
or the subway.
The subway. There certainly is no guarantee, but I think that we are finding, in this case, we are finding evidence that people are using, that are on the commuter rail, are using it more. It is reducing the carbon footprint in cars. Now, you have to have a reliable MBTA.
And
well, but that's
therein
another
lies
story.
the other
That might be
problem.
another show.
Because the trains have been
Right.
down until just
Right.
a week or
Right.
so ago
Correct.
for trackage.
Right.
The MBTA subway system is still in life support mode
Yeah.
at this stage.
Yeah.
and buses with all the traffic, have their own issues.
But I do think that there certainly is a connection between, some of these buildings and the use of the commuter rail, particularly the old Harvard Mills building,
Right.
where they actually have in their lobby it was part of their presentation to the zoning board and part of the decision. There is a TV complex or whatever monitor
Yeah.
showing when the trains are coming and stuff like that. So that was kind of well thought out
Yeah.
in that issue, and that was well thought out because there was a meeting with the zoning board, multiple meetings to what is the best fit in there, and whether you like the building or you don't.
Right.
And that's
That's a matter of taste.
that's why do they make chocolate ice cream? Because not everybody likes vanilla, right? So that's a matter of taste. But
Why tack on 3 floors to a building that's been around
exactly.
for more than
That's
a
another
century?
issue. But at least there was a process behind it. That's what really bothered me with this for Wakefield and for Reading and probably for Melrose too, is that we were not given credit for the careful planning we had done,
Right.
and gone to town meeting,
Right.
and had these forums, and getting zoning changes at town meeting, as are not easy. There's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of concern from and rightly so, and there should be a lot of discussion about that.
But also, we have 2 stations in Wakefield.
Exactly.
We have the station on North Avenue,
Right.
and we have the Greenwood station.
And the Greenwood station. And unfortunately, under the kind of regulations that are all embedded in here, in Chapter 40A, Section 3A, on how you meet the criteria of the state, the Greenwood area is doesn't really fit their boxes. So I think the Greenwood area will be looked at separately under our own thoughtful zoning, because I think that should be used, but not under, it doesn't work under here.
But that's one of the reasons why Greenwood has been such a hot real estate property in the last decade, is because of that proximity to
Absolutely.
rail and to bus.
Absolutely. Right.
And, they developed those apartments where McDonald's used to be.
Yeah.
They have built apartments across from Greenwood Plaza.
Right.
So, and that has drawn people to that area. But then when we talk about the downtown, what's to guarantee that these people are going to use public transportation?
Yeah. I mean, there's never a guarantee.
It doesn't seem like 40A has been well thought out by the people at the state level. I understand what they're trying to achieve. Doesn't sound like they've spent a whole lot of time thinking about the ramifications.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I would say that on the use of public transportation, that there are actually areas that they're going to not requiring any parking spaces. They don't want any parking at all at these buildings, because they do want to have people to use the public transportation. And I think it's working in areas, particularly in the city of Boston, where there are a lot of zip cars and things like that you can do. And you have buses and you have subways and everything.
But the city of Boston, it's easy to get to anything you need.
Right.
Wakefield, we don't have a supermarket downtown.
Yeah. There are nuances. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The other item that is a little bit interesting under this that we had never seen before is that oftentimes legislation comes down from the Commonwealth, and a lot of time it's opt-in, and this is an opt-in legislation. We need to opt in to do it. Okay. And if you don't opt in, you don't take advantage of what it is. Right? It doesn't matter.
But also, if we don't opt in, we lose
this is a little
funding.
bit different. This is a little bit different. So
it's not really an opt-in. It's an opt-in with a gun to your head.
It's an opt-in, yeah. There's a carrot and a stick, yeah. So, over the past 3 years, we have really been really done a lot of applications for grant funding through the state, and we have been very, very lucky, lucky in the sense that we were chosen for these grants because they are competitive, but a lot of hard work goes into it, and our staff does a lot of work to make sure. And over the last 3 years, we've received over $3.5 million worth of grants that we have used for a lot of projects, including upgrading water service and upgrading the roadways around it. North Ave being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that whole North Ave corridor, which had a water service that we would have had to replace at some point,
Right.
is now is replaced, and the roadway's all going to be redone. And you can see that now. You see the sidewalks all wrapped into that program. A lot of other smaller items we got. The $1 million we got to redo Albion Street from Main to North Ave. Probably it turned into one of the nicest streets in town, with the trees
Came
and
out
the
beautifully,
plantings
yes.
and the bump outs and all these things you want to do, shortening distances so people can cross the street easier. That, through the Mass Works program, you would not qualify for Mass Works grants if you don't adopt this program. So that's how the law stands right now, or how the regulations stand right now. So it's I think the intent of this was good, because I do believe, and there is a need for housing, there's a need for affordable housing, and you can see that from the housing prices, and the rental prices are
Housing prices are
astronomical.
crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Supply and demand, let's create more supply, bring that price down. So,
But at the same time, Steve, practically speaking, we're running out of building space.
Yeah, we are, but we always seem to find more, don't they?
Yeah, but at what price?
Yes. No, I get it.
At what price?
Yeah.
The green space that people used to be able to enjoy is becoming smaller and smaller.
Yeah, but there's also been some reimagining of some spaces that could be reimagined.
Yeah.
That do provide housing for a lot. And I think Foundry Street is an example.
Yeah.
And I would say over the next decade, there's going to be a lot of more changes on Foundry Street. I'm hoping that they are multi-use buildings, like where Tono's is, which is a great, I think we're almost going back to the old days where you had the retail businesses on the first floor,
right,
and you had apartments above. Going back in time.
Well, and Foundry Street has changed fundamentally because that was an industrial area.
Right.
And now it isn't anymore.
Right.
Same with Water Street for the most part. Water Street was Haywood, Wakefield, the piano factory, and the shoe factory, L.B. Evans. And it isn't anymore. A lot of those homes in that area were built for the immigrant families that came to work in the factories. Right. How many, in fact, that brings up a point. How many of some of those homes can be repurposed, rebuilt, restructured to also fit into this plan?
Well, again, this plan doesn't require one unit to be built.
No. But there are buildings that could be multiple units. There are single family homes.
You would look at lots in that area.
Yeah.
Okay. And the density, you need to create a district that is a sufficient size.
Yeah.
And that creates a density of 15 units per acre.
Right.
So I think what and there's been a great job on the subcommittee that's doing this, and working with members of the planning board, town council, the town employees. This is almost a math problem.
Right.
So, and they're doing a great job trying to put this in under the state law. So I think that's a good distinction to make. So to answer your question, they've come up with the point that if you took a 4,000 square foot lot, and you would need to have 4 units on that lot in order to meet the density and comply. So 4 units on a 4,000 square foot lot, they're not going to be huge units. There's going to be some tightness there. There won't be a lot of parking available because you can't.
Right.
You need to have some green space under our bylaw.
Right.
You can only go up so high. Keeping all the other parameters the same. But under looking at this bylaw, the capacity is you could have a number of homes, whether either existing or with additions, that could, in that kind of half a mile around the train station, you could think of the side streets, could make that work. What concerns me a little bit with this is that although, and the regulations are changing. This is how crazy it is. The regulations are changing. Very few people have enacted this, and the communities have enacted it, and the regulations are changing. There's talk about you can have some commercial mixed use in them now, but that's going to be very difficult to do. And in my mind, something like that, you may want a special permit. There may be things that we want as a community to make sure are done, not just as a matter of right. So
Right.
I think that our
Like a restaurant or a store
exactly
or a service company or
establishment,
whatever.
because
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you do have issues you need to talk about. You need to talk about parking.
yeah.
You need to talk about things like that. So I think what the group is looking at, and there's been several presentations to the town council,
Mm-hmm.
several presentations to the public. There are forums in it, and I would just say to the public, this is a uncomfortable issue for some people to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just, Wakefield has a great history of, meeting these things with respect and talking to each other well. And whether you're on the panel or whether you're in the crowd, we see what's happening in what's happening in the U.S. Senate. I mean,
Sure.
really,
Which is a travesty.
hopefully
Yeah.
that's hopefully, I don't believe that's what we're about, being at open town meeting. We've had, great discussions, people on the opposite side.
And we've had energetic discussions, but with respect.
With respect, and
Yeah.
and I think that
Yeah,
will
yeah.
continue. So the highlights are, we're gonna, and at the end of the day, what we need to do as a community, so we don't get penalized,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Which is a big thing, all right? In my opinion, it's a big thing, is create a district within the half a mile from the train stop, that will support the creation of 1,696 units, which is the MB 40A calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Which was actually higher, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That actually, will fit, that could be built
Mm-hmm.
in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe won't be built. Maybe
Mhm.
only 3 will be built. Maybe you have a 2-family, and this would allow up to a 4-family. Maybe you put on a 3rd unit,
Right.
and so your kids can live there. That's not going to count for that unit itself won't count, because now it's only a 3-unit building.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. Looking at this, it's just that we've created the ability to put that 4th unit in.
Okay, but are we also talking about an area like what used to be called, when I was a kid, Victory Village, which
Yes.
is over behind?
I know where it is.
Exactly. Exactly.
My uncle used to
Off
live there,
Richardson.
so yes.
And a lot of those are 2-unit
Right.
buildings
Yeah.
on lots
Yeah.
of what we're talking
Yeah.
about, and yet they don't count?
They could be, if that was included in the zoning area,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And they were allowed to go to 4 units as a matter of right,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they could go to 4 units is
Mhm.
what counts. It's not if they're built, it's that the fact that they could.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all about creating the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
creating the ability,
Mm-hmm.
without a special permit, not necessarily it happening.
Mm-hmm.
But Victory Village is a great example of an area that
Mm-hmm.
could be possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because that was all housing that was built at the end of the war for returning
Exactly.
GIs.
Right, and a lot of families in Wakefield, that's where they got their start,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the homes, in Victory Village, yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Showing the history here, David, knowing where Victory Village, people are going to Google that. What was Victory Village in Wakefield?
But
Yeah.
but at the same time, also now Greenwood has a number of 2-family and 3-family homes already,
Correct.
and not necessarily on Main Street. There are quite a few on Main Street,
Right.
but there are 2 within sight of my house on Greenwood Avenue. You know, and there are others sprinkled around the Greenwood
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think it's we need to do, in my opinion, we need to look at this very practically as a
Mhm.
community. We need to make sure that we can continue to get these grants. And
Mhm.
in my heart of hearts, I really don't believe that there'll be a lot of changes on the ground. In other words, you're not going to. see a lot of these developed, but the ability will be there. So really, where our kind of schedule is, we're going to go through the winter with a number of forums on this.
Yep.
And our thought process is to come with an actual proposal for a bylaw and it's an overlay district. So it's a district that will be overlaid over an underlying district in the area, and allow for this type of housing around the train stations. Okay. From a financial perspective, what does concern me a bit is that, and we talked about it, we did tax classification the other night, is that, we cannot as a community continually trade commercial property for residential, okay? Because the tax the tax,
It undermines the tax
it undermines
base.
the tax base.
Yeah,
Wakefield is about, let's call it 80-20, residential.
Right.
To commercial, and a lot of the communities around us, except for Saugus, because of Route 1,
Right.
are woefully, I think Melrose is 95-5,
Wouldn't be
residential
surprised.
to commercial.
And
So
I assume this is affecting them as well.
Yes. Oh, yeah. They're right on the rail too.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're on the rail too. They spent a lot of, I think you can take an area and rezone it, because let's face it, if you rezoned part of Foundry Street to be included in this, where some of those buildings are, they're not going to be, no one's going to, I'm not going to tear down this, 62 unit building to build 4.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. But maybe that's because it doesn't make any sense, the zoning itself. So I just, personally, I know that we have to do it, in my opinion. I was disappointed that a lot of what we had spent time doing in Wakefield, very thoughtfully and over a long period of time,
Right.
is not, isn't really taken into account. And not just Wakefield, Melrose, Reading,
Right.
our neighbors have done the same thing around their stops.
Maybe we need to sit down and talk with our state reps and state senators.
Yeah, I know, but I think it's already a law. So we have to do something by the end of next year.
Laws can change.
Laws can change. Yeah.
Laws can
What is
change.
interesting about this is that when the legislation first came out,
Yep.
Wakefield was actually listed as a bus community, not a
Rail and
not an MBTA rail community, a commuter rail community, I guess to call it, which would have required us to create a district that would give even more housing, because you needed to increase your housing stock by 20% in a bus community versus 15 in a commuter rail community.
Yeah.
And we were able to at least ratchet it to that. No, we're a commuter rail community. We have 2 stops.
We've been a rail community for 150 years.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of that. So it is it is an interesting process to go through.
Yep.
I think that part of the thought process was to, put in those infill type of housing, and maybe we can show real quick a picture of one of them that we were thinking about.
Sure.
Let's go. This is a lot of stuff we already talked about, but let's look at, so the housing
These are
on
some
Richardson
existing
Ave.
homes.
Existing homes on Richard Ave. And Richard said, so do they meet an MSBA density? I mean, they are, 3 units on 5,600 square feet.
Yep.
And then 4 units on 4,300 square feet.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we would need a district that had 4 units for 4,000 square feet.
Okay.
So although they are what I would consider in my heart of hearts, infill, we talked about that infill, not a high rise, not a single family, but in the ground, those really aren't they don't meet the criteria, which is sad.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
No, I think it needs to be
But they could be part
discussed.
of the district. They can be part of the district.
Yeah. It needs to be discussed some more.
So. Yeah.
But there will be more on this as we go
There will
along.
be absolutely more, and I encourage the public to look at the forums. The planning board is having a number of forums on this. You don't need to go there. It's going to be all on
online.
All online.
Yep.
Although when we get all our Zoom rooms done, people will be able to go as well. but it is something that you can certainly go over and take a look at, or look at your leisure. I mean, if you have nothing else to do on a Saturday morning, I'm going to look at the planning board forum on this with your coffee.
Well, and we'll leave it there now. We will revisit it, I'm sure, as we come up to annual town
Yeah,
meeting.
I think, the thought process is something will be there in April.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a safe Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you
Thank
next time.
Thank you.